Alright, and 10.
The lights at Lambeau have been turned on. Welcome back as we're about to start the second half of the Raiders-Packers game. Here's a brief outline of the first half stats. The Raiders had a slight edge in the passing game, while the Packers had the edge in the running game. But the overall total yards are pretty even, as you can see. And it's even on the scoreboard at 14-14. In every game that Packers participate in the Solitaire League, they'll have an outstanding individual performance selected at the end of the game in both offensive and defensive categories. Based on the first half action, Jack Tatum of the Oakland Raiders is the front runner. He had 4 individual tackles in the first half alone, made his presence felt on both special teams and playing his safety position. Packers will have to be aware of his presence in the second half. In the offensive category, the outstanding performer so far from both teams has been Ahman Green of the Green Bay Packers, running back. He had 71 yards total offense on only 5 carries, including 1 touchdown. The Raiders will have to key on Green if they hope to limit the Packers' running game for the second half. Before we get into the game action, we're going to go through some more rules reviews of a couple of rules that have been asked to clarify. For this scenario, let's assume the Packer is the ball carrier. At the end of a time stop, if the ball carrier is within 3-yard range of an unengaged opposing player, neither of those players can be repivoted for the next stop. In this case, neither Duerson nor the Packer can be repivoted, however the Dick Butkus figure to the left can be. Just as a side note, this Packers figure you see here was made by my friend Big Lock at 4th and 1 Customizations. He just started his own YouTube channel a couple months ago, and as you can see displayed here, he has an extensive catalog of videos already. Gives you tips and displays of how to customize your own figures, get started in the hobby itself, coaching tips, a whole gamut of stuff. His videos are nice and short, you get straight to the point, and if you want to see his figures in action, just check out the Fat 8 channel. A future tutorial subject is going to cruise the web and show you some of the best electric football sites and also some of the best YouTube channels for your electric football needs. And one of the best YouTube channels right now is the Fat 8 Conference. Let's get back to our game and our rules discussion. In this scenario, Green, number 30, is the ball carrier. He is in with 3-yard range of both Bears figures, but since they are engaged, Green can be repivoted for the start of the next stop. Here's some gameplay action from the Calgary Electric Football League, which I belong to, and I'm going to explain the concept of the use of stationary players on felts. I'd come up with the idea of using felts for stationary players back in 2012, I believe it was. And the reason being was traditional magnets wouldn't work on a field like this, which is PVC plastic. Coach is allowed to have up to 5 players on offense and up to 3 players on defense to be made stationary. Stationary status must be done before the ball is snapped and the play begun. The multi-stop system I'm using has a snap stoppage and up to 3 full stops. And the coach can decide when a player comes off of stationary status and becomes mobile at the end of any stop. Once a player is made mobile, he has to remain so for the rest of the play. The one exemption, though, is the quarterback, who can be made mobile or stationary at the end of any stoppage at the coach's discretion. In a scenario where an offensive player makes contact with a defensive player who is currently stationary, that defensive player has to come off his pad and remain in his original position, while the offensive player may pivot off of him, going in a different direction if he so chooses. In a case where a defensive player makes contact with a stationary offensive player behind the line of scrimmage, it'll be ruled defensive holding penalty. Well, the basic premise behind the stationary player is to simulate playing in zone defenses, something that utilizing a multi-stop system allows you to do. You may have noticed here in a few instances that when a player is removed from the stationary pad is made mobile that he's often repositioned off the pad from his original position. Now, this is a modification that I'll explain better in this next clip here coming up. I think too, having the option of using stationary players really adds a real strategy element to playing defense. You can play zone defenses or even man or a combination of the two. I think that style really suits playing on the large side, skill sides, fields like these. The method of coming off the pad placement is the player figure can be repositioned within a 360 degree circumference of the pad itself, but the player figure must maintain physical contact with the pad before it is removed. The player can also be repositioned in his original placing. The restrictions on placement though are that you can't be repositioned to become engaged with an opposing player, you can't be placed within 3-yard range of a ball carrier, and you can't be placed in the path of a receiver attempting to make a catch. We first just utilized the felt material itself, but we sometimes found a problem with the players coming off the pad with more powerful boards that we have, so I redesigned them, high-tech. The bottom section is felt, the middle section is foam, and the top layer is an indoor-outdoor turf. Most of this you can get at Michael's, and it eliminated the problem. It also made them easier to handle versus a floppy piece of felt. The whole idea behind this concept of stationary movement is the player's not locked into being a statue in one spot on the field. His feet aren't cast in concrete. There's some dynamic movement going on as a player reads the play and then reacts to the play as it unfolds before him. I first developed this stationary movement ruling in playing on my scale CFL fields, which are considerably bigger than an NFL scale field, and even with an extra man, 12 man aside, playing defense is a real challenge. After having added the stationary option movement ruling to our gameplay in the Calgary Electric Football League, coaches found it added another element to playing defense especially, and after using it for several games we found it didn't really upset the gameplay balance. It just added another tool for the coach to use, and it added to the fun element. Alright, enough of this preliminary stuff. Let's get this game underway with the second half kickoff. Looks like the workhorse for the Oakland Raiders, Bo Jackson, taking the opening kickoff. Here's an example where the 3-yard rule works in the runner's favor. Jackson down at the 27. Hand off to Marcus Allen with Jackson lead blocking. 5 yards out of bounds. It's Marcus Allen getting the ball again on back-to-back plays. It's Buchanan, the cornerback, with his tackle. 1-yard gain for Allen. The Raiders have a double tight end set while the Packers bring in extra beef along the defensive line. It's a handoff to Jackson with Allen lead blocking. No gain on the play. Raiders are forced to punt on 4th down. After a 46-yard punt and a good return by Sharper, Packers start with good field position. Green gets the ball for the Packers' first offensive play of the second half. I think the cameraman fell asleep at this point, but Green made 5 yards before being tackled by Townsend. On a similar play call, Green has given the ball to test the Raiders' left defensive line. But Nelson, the linebacker, comes up with a big hit. 1-yard gain, 3rd down coming up. Rogers is flushed out of the pocket by the Raiders linebacker Nelson. On an awesome type play, Taylor gets the ball and goes for a 6-yard run. The Packers are successful in their 3rd down conversion. Rogers drops back to make the first pass attempt of the second half. James Lofton is spotted wide open. And the reception is made. Several Raiders in the defensive backfield are now in hot pursuit of James Lofton. And Lofton does electric football's most frustrating play, the button hook at the 1-yard line. Taylor takes the ball on a 1-yard plunge into the end zone. Touchdown Packers. They draw first blood. the second half. It's Bo Jackson catching the ball at the 4-yard line. He nearly broke a kick return all the way in the first half, so let's see what he can do here. And it's the safety, Darren Sharpner, making a last man back special teams tackle, preventing Jackson from probably going all the way again. The Raiders were probably one tackle away from either tying this game up or getting great field position. Clay Matthews records a sack on Stabler's rollout. It's any touch tackling on quarterback. Packers D brings the heavy pressure, forcing Stabler to throw a quick out to Allen. Allen makes the reception in front of base contact isn't made. However, this is an instance where the 3-yard rule can work to a ball carrier's disadvantage, as he's not allowed to be pivoted and goes out of bounds for a 6-yard gain. The Raiders find themselves facing another 3rd and long situation. They did well with this in the first half. Let's see how they do here. Stabler spots wide receiver Brown, who's just in beyond the coverage provided by Clay Matthews, as the Raiders attempt to convert on a 3rd down conversion. It's incomplete, so Raiders are forced to punt once again. After a 36-yard punt, Dave Casper provides excellent special teams coverage with an instant tackle. Aaron Rodgers attempts to throw a pass to wide receiver John Jefferson near midfield. And Rodgers throws his first incompletion of the second half. Rodgers rolls out with Amon Green in tow. Amon Green is given the ball, and Ted Hendricks comes up from his linebacker spot to limit the gain to 5 yards. The mobile Rodgers rolls left and spots his favorite receiver, James Lofton, going down the sideline. The Raiders' Whitson has good coverage, however. Speedy Lofton, however, beats the coverage and is off to the races. With open field ahead of him, the Packers score in the second series in a row and go up 28-14 at the end of the 3rd quarter. Ball on the base yields consistent results as Jackson starts at the 4-yard line again. Big kick return here would be rather timely for the Raiders to regain some momentum. However, Jackson is run down from behind by Robinson, and the Raiders start with the worst field position of the game. The Stabler to Allen pass attempt renders an incomplete result. Reggie White and Giamatti are applying big-time pressure to Stabler, and he has to get rid of the ball right away as he attempts to throw to wideout Cliff's Branch. Stabler to Branch is incomplete for a 36-yard gain with immediate tackle by Robinson as the Raiders vastly improve their field position. Jackson takes the handoff and yields a 3-yard gain on the play. Stabler tries to hit his number 1 receiver, Cliff Branch, with another big pass. However, they fail to connect, and the Raiders face another 3rd and long conversion. The Raiders' tight end Casper provides a good block along the line, providing Stabler with some extra time. With the Packers' excellent downfield pass coverage, Stabler does a check-down swing pass out to his tight end, Dave Casper. It's complete to Casper, and Willie Buckhannon, the cornerback, makes the tackle. The Raiders are going to be 1 yard short of the first down and have a decision here to make. Down by 2 scores late in this fourth quarter, the Raiders start to go for it in 4th and 1. Jackson is given the carry, but the Green Bay linebackers have good outside containment and the ball reverses his direction. Ezra Johnson overpowers his block, however, and the Raiders lose the ball on a turnover on down. Running back Jim Taylor is given the ball on the handoff, and the Oakland Raiders, Whitson, limits the gain to 2 yards. As Rodgers rolls left, a cornerback blitz by Haynes almost comes within a microsecond of recording Oakland Raiders' first sack of the game. As in many situations when the defense brings the blitz, someone is left wide open. In this case, it's wideout Sterling Sharp. The Raiders dodge a bullet as the pass goes incomplete. A handoff goes to Taylor as the Packers try and eat up the clock. Jack Tatum answers the call for the Raiders' big play as he limits the gain to 1. The Raiders call their first timeout. With a 43-yard punt by Mastay and excellent downfield punt coverage, the Packers limit the Raiders to poor field position at the start of a very important series. If the Raiders have any hope in this game, they'll have to do something in this series of downs. The Packers tackle Ezra Johnson is bringing the heat onto Stabler as he has to scramble to try and buy time for his downfield receivers. The fleet-footed Stabler avoids the pressure as he looks downfield for a big gain possibility. Here's a real scenario where the quarterback can be rendered stationary after being mobile after a stop, unlike any other player on the field. Packers' defensive secondary is providing pretty good blanket coverage on any deep play possibilities, so Stabler utilizes his last stop to try and gain some separation for his receivers. Any player that falls over remains down until the play is over. Stabler airs the ball deep downfield to Brown the wideout. The pass goes incomplete. I think Mr. Brown's base needs some rework. Packers are in deep prevent coverage, and even with a 3-man front, they bring the pressure onto Stabler. Stabler does thread the needle and avoid the sack. However, he does go across the line of scrimmage, so he's forced to run. Stabler gains 12 yards, but time is of the essence as the Raiders call their second timeout. Stabler abandons the pocket early to avoid any pressure. Stabler is running out of time and options and has no choice but to throw it deep downfield to Cliff Branch, his favorite target, in somewhat tight coverage. The Packers D, playing deep prevent defense, intercept the ball. However, there's a penalty flag on the play. The official's ruling is defensive pass interference on number 36, Leroy Butler, to safety. The ruling is a big positive change for the Raiders' field position. And almost as important, it takes very little time off the clock. Defensive tackle Ezra Johnson brings the pressure again, causing Stabler to scramble instead of looking downfield for the pass. Having crossed the line of scrimmage, Stabler is committed to the run. After a very positive 24-yard run, Stabler wisely runs out of bounds at the 6, stopping the clock. In the dying moments of regulation time, the Raiders are going to have to put it in the end zone if they have any hope. Kenny Stabler spots Fred Biletnikoff in the goal line crossing route. It's touchdown Raiders as they narrow the deficit to 7 with 2 plays left in the game. The Raiders are going to attempt an onside kick, and to do that, I roll a 12-sided die. And then I count up from the nearest sideline, the players along the kicking line, and then I line the ball up 11 yards away from that particular player. If a 12 is rolled, the ball went directly out of bounds, and the kick has to be redone. The kicking team is penalized. In this instance, it's the first player. Players along both kicking lines have been re-pivoted, the ball has been targeted, and let's see if the Raiders are successful in their onside kicking attempt. And it's the Packers' John Jefferson, wide receiver for the Packers, recovering the onside kick. The Packers take a knee on the final play of the game, and we have our final score. The Green Bay Packers triumph in their home opener. And here's some of the final game day stats. It's pretty wide open as far as offense, and defense sort of took a back seat in this game. You can see the stats are pretty close. The stats don't reveal as the Packers' defensive linemen are very dominant the whole game. For defensive player of the game, we're going to go with Jack Tatum, who is one of the lone bright spots in the Raiders' defense who had trouble shutting down the big play. The player selected for offensive player of the game is the Green Bay Packers' James Lofton, wide receiver, who had 120 yards in the second half alone. The next game on the schedule is one of the oldest rivalries in pro football, as the Chicago Bears with Gale Sayers, Walter Payton, and Dick Butkus visit Lambeau Field. This is a final side note to this video. Much of the rule set and playstyle that I use for my games has been based on a playing system designed and created by Anthony Burgess with his Miniature Professional Football League. As you can see, he has a Facebook page dedicated to his system, and if you're all curious about learning more, that's probably worth a visit. The gameplay is very simulation based with the multi-stop, just like you've seen in my videos, and it really lends itself very well to being played on a scale-sized fields like the one I use. You did have a DVD available explaining this entire system. It's not currently available at the time of this video, but if you go to his website there, he's got some short videos and lots of pictures explaining his system. And as you can see, he's a big Carolina Panther fan, and of course they're currently undefeated at this point, so good for them. They've been a long-suffering fan base, so it's good they got something to cheer about. One of the great aspects to this hobby is there's lots of different playstyles out there one can use, and this playstyle just happens to appeal to myself. In the Calgary Electric Football League that I participate in, a couple of the coaches in the league, Shane and JD, made up some videos explaining our rules, which for the most part are based on the MPFL system, with the exception of the kicking rules, which were entirely made up by Shane, commissioner of the league. A lot of electric football leagues adapt rules from other leagues. It's all part of sharing in the community and having fun with this hobby. Here's a very brief excerpt from one of the videos.
Breaking down the play in the CEFL. The first step is the offense has 60 seconds to set up their offense. The defense has 15 seconds from when the offense says set for themselves to say set.
Next up on the upcoming agenda for tutorial videos, we're going to delve into some hands-on, do-it-yourself kind of stuff to how to build one of these scale-sized fields for yourself. We're going to be getting some sawdust in their hair and some wood splinters in their fingers. So until then, keep cracking the plastic.